Welcome, Antwaun Thompson, to Coaching the Session. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you doing today, Michael?
Doing well. Thank you so much for asking. And thank you for coming on. What you do is so profound. You help teens with their life in the ways that they don't even understand that they need that help, that mentor, that type of guide, whether it be athletics or life skills, you do it. Can you touch base on how you got into this type of work and basically going into this type of work? Like, what type of man does it take for this?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the opportunity really came about for me in 1985. And it
Mm,
goes way back to 1985. I was asked to coach a basketball team because they didn't have enough coaches. And the kids that were left were not selected for the other team. So obviously what you would call the leftovers, if you will.
mhm,
But I love the sport. And the season I had with those kids was life changing. And from the standpoint of they not only competed at a very high level, they actually ended up with the same losing record as the handpicked team. And what I found was I was able to teach them more than just the athletic components and about working together and trusting each other and having personal responsibility and accountability for each other. And the opportunities kept coming. After that, had an opportunity to coach at a high school and coach a freshman junior varsity team for 4 years. And every year I learned more and more about how to connect with kids. And the most important thing was building a rapport with them and a trust factor. And the athletic part of it was secondary. Fast forward years, and what I'm doing now, I'm still coaching in my 10th year at a private school. And every year I've found myself being able to teach more about life than I ever have about the game of basketball.
mhm. And trust, you said something really important there, trust. When a teacher or coach presents themselves to a young mind, that trust is going to be formed eventually, right, with time, but it has to be maintained also. You can't break their trust because once you do, it's going to be difficult to get that back. What are some techniques that you use to build the trust and then keep the trust?
I will start by using the three key components whenever I coach a basketball team. There are three things that I absolutely start with and I stick with throughout, and the results have always been positive, regardless of wins and losses. And the first one is building a rapport. That's
Mm,
the most important thing, getting to know the individual because you have to know what makes them tick and what makes them go. And the second part is players' development. And then the last component is the team chemistry. And all of those will happen if two things take place. And for me, it's first and foremost is listening to what's being said. And the second part, even more important, is not judging what's being told to you, because many kids feel as though they're not listened to. So when
mm.
you actually listen and don't give a response and try to give them advice and on everything that they say, they're more inclined to open up and share more with you. And that's the experience I've had over my last 37 years of coaching.
Mhm. Would you say that teens nowadays are more in their feelings than when you started back in 85?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the Michael, the biggest difference I can tell you is kids were a lot more appreciative of a coach's efforts quicker than they are now.
Hmm.
And I think that social media and things of that nature come play a big part in that because they're trying to compete on so many different levels. It's not just athletics, it's about exposure, it's about acceptance. And before it was just about in 1985 to 1992 or 95, it was all about just where we were in that gym and just us. That was all that was important. Now there are so many other distractions that they have to deal with, and it makes it tougher, but it doesn't mean it can't be accomplished the same way.
Right. Having them be so involved with the world because they have their smartphones, they have their computers, their laptops, right? Where they can know all about the world at the click of a mouse. And that's a lot for children, especially for the growing mind where they're seeing the world, the negativity, perhaps, maybe not so much of the positivity, because what sells? Negativity. You turn on any news network, you're going to find some negativity. And though they might not pay attention to that negativity at that moment, it does have a severe impact on their mental state. So they might be more anxious. And that's where depression goes in and bullying and all that stuff to try to make themselves feel better, make them feel superior, where though everything around them might be in a bad place, they say, I want to make my life better. Do you find that people on your team are more so, I want to make my life better. I'm going to do what's good for me rather than for the whole team collectively?
For me, that's never been an issue. And I think that that's one of the things I'm like, why I love what I do, because I get the opportunity to instill those values and morals about team before self. That's always
Mm,
been the other philosophy that I use. And then when the kids buy into that, they apply that to every aspect of their lives and then they pay that forward. And I actually have a perfect example I'd love to share with you of
please.
how that's transpired. So this past year, we just completed our fourth consecutive conference championship. And the kids that won the championship this year did not play a second of the championship game last year. A week after last year's championship, two of the players came to me and they said, Coach, we want to be those guys next year. I'm like, I love that. Well, it's going to take some work. And that old saying, champions are made in the off season. Well, they took that to heart. And a week later, and to this day, they've been working out with me every week. And even during this season, they worked. So they understood that team before self, and they knew even though they weren't in the game, they were still in the game, meaning they were rooting on their teammates. Well, we win the championship this year, and less than a week after the championship, the seventh graders, that'll be eighth graders next year, say, Coach, can we start working out with you for next year? And they didn't say they want to be those guys, but the standard had been set. So they're
Mm,
sharing that, and the players are singing that. And the last thing I'll add is this was our fifth championship in 7 years. This was the least talented team that I had of all the championship teams, but it was the most complete team that I've ever coached at this school because they bought into that team before self mentality.
And I would love to talk about the mindset of that. What I do is I'm a mindset coach. So I help people with their mindset, how they think. And they didn't play a second in that championship, and they caused them to say, I don't want to feel this way again. I want to play in the championship. So they had a failure, they had a loss, and they say, I don't want that to be my future. I want to do everything I can in order to make that a possibility. And for young minds, especially around that age, they're going to look around peers, other men, and they're going to say, who is going to be a hero in my life? Who's going to be a mentor? Who's going to be someone I should follow? And that's why we have like our seniors, right? Whether it be high school or elementary school, you have your seniors and you're like, you look up to them. And so those seventh graders that look up to the eighth graders, or those sixth graders that look up to the seventh graders and eighth graders, they see that and they see how hard they work, and they say, I have to replicate that. And even though they might not have the talent as the previous years, they have the mindset because it was instilled upon them from somewhere higher. Do you find that having teammates like that on your team makes your team stronger? Or do you feel like you're able to instill that into the team, regardless if other teammates have that type of mindset?
I think it has to do with each individual buying into the philosophy of the team. And you lay a great foundation for me to share. Early on, it was actually in 1990. I coached a team, and I say to this day, the best team I've ever coached. Total opposite of what the team I just described to you.
Mm,
All five starters averaged double figures. I mean, really talented team. And the first person off the bench almost averaged double figures. So a truly complete team, very talented, but very unselfish. They all
mm,
understood, because first and foremost, I never let one player stand out above another, because it wasn't about that. It's about team.
mhm,
So they all understood their roles, and they never went above and beyond what they needed to do and what was in the best interest of the team. So again, I think it goes back to teaching the philosophy and the mindset. Like you said, the mindset is team before self. And as long as you understand that and you work towards that goal, you always stay within the boundaries of what the team's overall goal is. And to be successful, both as a team, but also as an individual, because even a well talented player has to understand, hey, yeah, I can score 50 points a game, but we can still lose.
mhm.
But hey, how about I score 20 and let everybody else kind of and start getting other teammates involved? They're going to play harder. They're going to put forth more effort. Everybody stays tuned in, and the ultimate goal is easily attainable.
Mhm. And that environment is going to be positive because everyone is saying, hey, let's do this together, teamwork, team effort, and then just building that team aspect on life. When we look at society today, right, we look at our young men and women growing up, we have cliques, right? We have gangs, social media hangouts, you know, group chat rooms, right? Everyone has their own little posse per se. Do you find that your team sticks together as a team, saying, I'm going to hang out with the basketball kids hang out with the basketball kids? Or do you find that they also have other groups that they migrate to? So they might go with the people who are football players or soccer players, volleyball players. So they're a part of multiple groups. Or do you find that it's just one family in one sport?
The kids that I work with, both at the school where I am and with my nonprofit, they are a very diverse group of kids, and they hang out with a lot of different kids. And a big part of it, I only say, I guess it's from my experience, is the environment that I create with the nonprofit and also with the coaching is inclusivity.
Mm,
Is, yeah, you may know these kids that may be in that be coming to work out or in an open gym or a camp or a clinic, but I want you to meet other people, understand where other people come from, find out what your differences are and what your similarities are. And so it's, for me, it's about creating that wholesome environment. So I can only speak from the kids that I work with, but they're all crossed over into different groups. They're not in one clique. Now there are there's a few exceptions to that, obviously,
mhm.
but obviously at the same time, for me, that's a challenge for me, is to share with them that, hey, there's more out there for you, and don't limit your opportunities by hanging out with the same people all the time. Because you know that old saying, show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
When I was in elementary, I did basketball, and Coach Jackson was the guy who was my coach, great coach. He would have us do suicides. It was, you have to go to the foul line, then back, half court back. So you had to do that in 30 seconds, right? And when you didn't do it in 30 seconds, you had to go back on the line and do it again. But the whole team had to do it. If one person on the team didn't do it in 30 seconds, everyone was running. What I found is that some days I didn't want to push, or I didn't want to get it into that 30 seconds, or maybe I just wasn't feeling good. But then some days I would kill it. I would just be able to do it. If I had to do it 5 or 6 times, I was just doing it, regardless if other people on the team weren't able to do it. Just different days, different body types to be able to do that, right? Do you find that creating a balance in the athletics for those students or your team is important to be equal, or to have people as, okay, well, he's really talented, I'm going to have him push more, so the team per se is not holding him back, even though he could score 50 points, but he's also passing the ball to other people. He has that ability to be more. Do you push those individuals more so than other people on the team, or do you just allow everyone to get the same type of treatment, and then if they want more, they come to you?
I treat every player the same, because the one thing that I'm always open and honest with kids. And what I mean by that is, I'll use the example of the kids on our team that our best player averaged like 24 points a game, and he easily could have scored 44 points, 50 points a game.
Mhm.
He was that talented, but the team knew he was that talented. So knowing his makeup, it didn't take much for me to go, hey, listen, when you get yours, it's really important that you keep your teammates involved. Plus, our philosophy was a team offense, so everybody touched the ball all the time. And there were games where he knew he had to score, or I say, hey, listen, you're gonna have to put a few more up this game. And the kids understood that. But he was one of those kids that was included with everybody. I never separated kids. And an example again of what you're talking about is, some kids not being as talented, but the effort has to be the same from the top player to that last player. Because if it's a team, everybody has to be held to the same standard. Because if you don't, then you're telling each player, hey, yeah, you can do this, but you can't do that. Kids know
Mm,
this, and these are conversations they have outside the lines, outside the gym.
mhm,
And you can say whatever you want, but kids are open and honest with themselves and with each other.
mhm,
And so I never have ever separated kids and said one, hey, you're better than this kid, you're going to do this. And as far as accountability, another example, and I'll give you an example why this is the best team. And this happened without any of my involvement. We had a kid that broke a team rule during the year. Well, it was a seventh grader. Two of the eighth graders came to me the next day and told me, hey, coach, so and so broke a rule. And my response was, okay, well, what do you propose we do about it? And their response was, make him sit in the bleachers and watch us run. Now, we did a variation of the run you call, and I don't use that word. It's just a preference. I call it running the lines.
mhm,
So had them run lines. And when I say had them run, it wasn't like one set of them or two sets. I mean, I ran them. And they knew what they were going to be undertaking to teach a lesson to their teammate, that we have rules that everybody has to abide by, regardless of who you are and what your status is in school or whatever it might be. So after running, I said, listen, that was a punishment. And the young man, I asked him, I say, hey, you understand what this is about? And he goes, yes, sir, I do. I broke a team rule and I have to, take my punishment. Now he thought he would be the one running and then watching him run. But afterwards, they had a team meeting. I said, if you guys want to impose any more disciplinary action, that's going to be on you as a team. And they had a team meeting at the end of practice. And they came to me about 5 minutes after and they said, Coach, we had a discussion, we voted, and it was unanimous that our next game, which happened to be the alumni game, that he would not play, nor would he dress for that game. And I'm like, I'm fine with that. It's a team decision. Yes, I'm the coach, but it's your team. And they took ownership of that. And the young man knew he had to go home and tell his parents, I'm not going to be dressing and playing because I broke a team rule. I never heard from a parent. It was never brought up again. And I even asked the team permission to share the story, like I'm sharing it with you, because it was an internal thing. So I respect team to that level that even as a coach, I wouldn't share anything that they wouldn't want me to share because it's about team.
What I also notice is that we have a lot of followers nowadays and not as many leaders. Maybe it's because of social media. And when you go to Instagram, you hit follow. So I'm a follower of this person. Maybe you go to Facebook and you hit friend request, and then you can follow them, meaning you see what their feed says. So we follow people rather than we lead. Your team had the opportunity at that point where they were determining a punishment or a course of action for this other student who broke the rule to be a leader, or to say, okay, well, one person that's the best player in the game said this, they're the leader, right? They look up to this person as a leader. We're going to just mimic what this person does. And this kind of goes into life skills too, because if you're a leader, you're going to move differently in the world. You're going to think differently. What's the difference between raising a follower and a leader, whether it be on the sports team or in the real world?
So when conversations arise, when we talk about leadership, when I talk to them about leadership, everybody's not built to be a leader day one. Leadership is earned and learned. Some people are natural leaders. You know that, and I know that. But at the same time, a person that's a natural leader also has the ability to teach a follower to be a leader by leading by example. And that is what I really focus a lot on, and what I teach and what I encourage is, yeah, you may not be a leader today. And I've always watched your kids' mannerisms and their body language. You can tell that they are apprehensive and they want to see what somebody else does before they do something. There are times where I'll pull a kid aside and I say, hey, I see what you're doing. You don't need that affirmation. You have to make decisions for yourself, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how you learn what your leadership style is. You have to find out what that is. You can't sit back and wait one day, hey, I'm gonna step up and be a leader, because it always doesn't go the way that you expect. You watch people's failures just like you watch their successes. It's like anybody else, like you and I growing up, we've watched people fail, we've watched them succeed. When I see people succeed, that's what they did to succeed. If I see people fail, that's what they did. That's what they didn't do. They should have done what this other person did. That's what I share with them. But my focus is always to teach each one of those kids eventually has the ability to be a leader. It's just a matter of what kind of leader you are. Like for instance, I'll give you the other example, the young man that's the best player on our team, quiet leader. First, he was on the varsity team for 3 years. He started as a sixth grader. That's how good he was. Didn't say 2 words for 2 years. I mean, he was that kind of kid, but he would work his tail off. This year, he spoke up only when necessary. And when he spoke up, trust me, everybody on that team listened. And that is what leadership is about. And again, you're giving me great opportunities to share more about how great this team was. We had a game where it was a blowout game, but it was early on, but I wanted to rotate kids in. So I had the end of the bench guys in, but I kept our best player in with all those other kids, because as well as I do, if I'm in with the best player on the team, I'm going to play hard, right? Because I want to be there with him. Well, the other team called a timeout, and we had one player that hadn't scored the whole game. And our best player leans over, sitting on the bench, and he tells him, he goes, hey, we're going to get you a basket when we go back out. The next rebound I get, I just want you to take off. I'm just going to throw it out there and you're going to get your point. What do you think happens? He gets a rebound. He throws it out. That kid scores. It was a home game. Everybody goes crazy. Bench goes crazy. I go crazy. But that was an example of a quiet leader taking a leadership role and making sure that his teammates were taken care of. Those are the things that I just absolutely love, and what inspires me to keep doing what I do.
Mhm. And then the aspect of the real world now, like going to the real world, right? That young man who was able to see a teammate who didn't score yet saying, "Hey, I'm going to get you that ball and you're going to shoot your shot,"
Right.
right? That's powerful because now if he's a business owner, right, he's CEO of a big company, he's going to see that. He's going to have people who look up to him saying, "This is a wonderful leader. This is a wonderful boss. I want to be a part of this company." Because when you have a big company, the CEO is just going to be the person who's running everything, but you have to have employees that look up to the CEO or the person who owns the company as someone that they want to follow. Because if they don't want to follow them, then guess what? They're going to be miserable going into work. And it doesn't matter if you help build someone else's dream or you build your own dream, as long as you feel like you belong in that environment. There was a point when I was going through different bosses trying to figure out what is a leader, right? Because it didn't matter about gender. It was what makes a good boss. And I started to read books at the library, just trying to figure out what makes a good leader. And every different book has a different thing. And then, of course, if you have the real world life experience, oh, this person, I like they did this. I like that they did that, or this person did a really good job in this area. But we all have our weaknesses per se. And we have employees to kind of fill that gap in. But to be a follower to a bad leader, that can lead to negativity down the line, right? You could be in a toxic type of relationship where you find yourself in a complacent lifestyle where you're like, I can't change my career because I'm already 30 years in, right? So this is far down the line. But we look at that leader as, okay, this is a good leader. This is a poor leader, poor leadership. And then looking at the sense of, I choose to follow or I just decided to follow because of life circumstances. So the question that I want to ask you is, why do people not rise up to leadership roles when they have that capability to?
And you kind of described part of that, and it's from the bosses or leaders that you have. It's all about how they approach it. For me, it's about leading by example. And when you're teaching young people, not only right now, but what they're going to do when they get out of school and get into the real world and get a job and you get an entry level position, you go in, you work like you have that next level job. That has to be your mindset, because
Mhm,
guess what? Now, when you get promoted to that, it's nothing new. You prepared yourself for that. And then when you get that position, you start working like you are in the next position. That is your mindset. Now, that's their mindset of working to maybe start out as a follower, work your way up to being a leader. The
mhm,
flip side of that, going from top down, leading by example. If I see an entry level person that comes in, interacting with them, letting them know that you are an approachable leader. Being approachable is really important because it lets followers know where they stand. If you're just, hey, do what I say, just accomplish the job. If you do enough, you'll get promoted. Well, that's not very encouraging. But if I'm an engaging leader and I'm like, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, keep working, keep doing this. This is what happened. This is what happened. Making yourself available and being seen and doing what frontliners do is a sign of a great leader, because you don't separate yourself and think you're better than anybody else. And that's another point that's always emphasized, is you're no better than the person next to you. When you start thinking that, you'll eventually be a bad leader, because you
mhm,
always think you're better than everybody else. And you're only as good as the people under you.
mhm.
And that's
There,
always a way about developing people.
there was a story of a CEO who owned the company and everything, and he was doing some mopping on the main floor of the building. And that day, he had a bunch of new hires coming in, and the new hires would come in and they'll see the janitor, of course, him cleaning the floors. So they didn't think anything about him, right? They didn't know who he was. They just thought he was a regular janitor. And whenever these new people would come into the elevator to go upstairs, he would greet them and see how they responded. So he would say, "Hey, how you doing?" And some of them said, I don't have time for this." So he recognized that. He would get someone eventually saying, "Hi, I'm doing great. I'm here for an interview," and they'll have a little conversation before he takes the elevator. Well, while everyone's upstairs in the waiting room, he's getting changed. Now he's showing up And he's going into the room, and everyone's like, "Who's this?" "Oh, that's the CEO." And everyone is like, who didn't treat him as like, "Oh my God, this is the CEO. Yes, sir. How are you doing?" They were just like sweating, right? They're wearing suits and ties, and they're just like unloosening their ties. And they're like, "Okay, I just messed up," right?
Yeah.
It's about treating people with kindness, love, regardless of what world they are coming from. And I think that skill has to be taught because it is learned from our naturally from our environment and our behavior, similar to how racism is learned, right? Racism is learned through the environment, right? So how your parents are or how friends are, right? So you see that happen because if you don't talk about race, it doesn't exist. And I'll give you an example. When I was a teacher, I was in a car line when it was the morning time. There was a kindergartner who had just got out of the vehicle, and behind her was her classmates. So the classmates got out of the car, and the girl, she's a white girl, so she was walking into the building. She turned back and she saw these twins coming into the school, and they were black. She stopped and she ran to them, and they're hugging on the basketball court. And all the teachers, the mom saw, the parents saw of the kids, of the twins, and everyone was just smiling. Everyone was just so happy that that was happening. They didn't care about color. They just cared about friendship, about this person means this to me. And I enjoy that they are this person, right? When we have that type of leadership, right? I'm leading by example, and then other people see that, that's wisdom, right? And my dad was big on wisdom too. He would sit us down and he would talk to us for an hour and a half, almost like every other night. And when you're young, you're like, "Oh, dad, I got to talk again." And you listen. But I am so thankful for that, where he gave me that wisdom. And many of the students are passively learning through that wisdom from their seniors, because they're saying they did this, they're doing that in their life, and I want to also do this too. I learned from their failure, so I don't have to make the same mistake. And that leads to a positive type of life skill. I can learn from other people's mistakes, and I don't have to do it too. Because sometimes people like to learn from trying out things, similar to how you might tell a child not to touch a stove because it's hot, and you're explaining to them, "Hey, the stove is hot, please don't touch a stove." But they are so curious, so they're trying to touch a stove, and then you get fed up. You're like, "All right, touch the stove," right? They touch the stove to get burned, and they said, "Ouch, I should have listened," right? So some people need that where they have to touch a stove and get burned, versus some people that can see something and say, "Okay, that was a failure. I'm learning from wisdom, or I'm learning through wisdom." How powerful is it for your team to learn through wisdom rather than facing their own failure?
Oh, it's super important. And I wanted to share, if I could, before I get back to that, was the example you gave. I've had an experience similar to that. And you talk about a rewarding experience and watching it happen. You know, when you see parents that really see these kids don't see color, they see them for who they are. I had a camp, it was probably about 4 years ago. It was a girls' camp, high school girls' camp, and had about 24 girls in the camp, and it was pretty mixed. It was about 12. No, actually, I think it was yeah, about 10 black girls and 14 actually white girls. First, and as they get to camp, I always give them about 45 minutes to shoot around, kind of whatever. Well, you know how that went, right?
Mhm.
So one end of the court, all the white girls are shooting on one end of the basket, all the black girls are shooting on the other end. And I will say, I'll preface it by saying I expected it because it's like the 30-year camp since always happened. I'm like, okay. And I started smiling because I knew what was going to happen by the end of, if not that day, by the end of the second day. Well, by the end of the first day, after the first session, first part of the camp, I mixed them up for some drills and things of that nature. And then when they had a little break, I made them stay in their particular groups. By the end of that day, it was about as mixed could be. And at lunch the next day, they all pulled their phones out, started exchanging names, phone numbers, started following each other on
Mhm.
all the social media platforms. And to this day, some of these girls, some are in college now, they are all still in communication with each other. So to me, it's about creating the environment that allows them to have the discussions without having the discussions, meaning get to find out who people are
Mhm.
versus what they look like. So using your example of the kids that need to go through the process, regardless of what's being told to them. There's a young man that uh, was a high school freshman. 4 years ago now, a high school freshman comes into our clinics, and we have our open gyms every Sunday. And he comes in and little chip on his shoulder. I got this. And me as a coach, I'm trying to guide him. And he's playing selfish. And I got this guy. I hear you, but I'm going to do this. Well, you could start seeing how it was affecting the other kids because they've been in this environment. He was relatively new. They knew what the expectations were. We do everything together. We work together to help each other get better. So I pulled him to the side and we had a conversation. And it basically went like this. And by the way, I never yell at kids. I talk to them exactly how I'm talking to you, because the best way is to be honest with them, treat them like adults. They'll learn to be adults a lot sooner. So the conversation was, hey, you're in our environment. This is what the expectations are. You're going to either have to acclimate yourself to that, or this may not be the environment for you. And so he finished the day. I didn't see him for like 2 months. And I had really come to the conclusion, hey, he decided, hey, listen, I don't want anybody telling me how to play. I know how good I am. I don't need this. Well, after 2 months, he started coming regularly again. I never brought up what had transpired before. And to this day, he volunteers to come help work with our younger kids, which are middle school and elementary school kids. So the lesson for him to learn there was, yeah, I may know when coach is trying to help me get better. He realized that, yeah, you know what? If I listen, I actually did get better. I got better faster than trying to do it my way. Now we're trying to actually get him back in college because there was a situation there. But that was an example of a kid thinking they knew, but needed to go through the process and go, hey, you know what? This is what it is. Another example of a kid that goes through the process and not trusting himself and already having the ability to be successful. It's a kid that was actually on the championship team last year, always looking for affirmation, looking for, coach, am I doing this good? Doing this good. And after a while, yeah, it starts to rub you the wrong way because you could tell no confidence, no self, low self-esteem. And so start telling, hey, listen, I'll let you know. You just keep doing, because you have to see and be appreciative of what you accomplish as you go through the process. Well, about halfway through the season, we lose 2 players. This is during the COVID season, an abbreviated season. Kids are wearing masks, which you can imagine that's difficult in itself, run up down the court with the mask on. So we lose 2 starters. He was one of our 6 or 7 player, second player off the bench. Well, he gets catapulted right into the starting lineup 2 weeks before the tournament starts. And I'm a little nervous because I could tell he's like, oh my gosh, I'm on a big stage, He saves his best game for the championship game, basically wins the game for us, makes the all tournament team. And at the end of it, after the game, all the celebration came to me, goes, coach, thank you so much. Thanks so much for, giving me opportunity and teaching me all this stuff. I'm like, hey, listen, you're welcome, but you did the work. You finally trusted yourself by going through the process on your own and accepting what you knew was there all along. All I did was just kind of help you see it over a 2-3 year period. So it's just 2 examples of not knowing or thinking and having to go through the process, and another just going through the process and seeing the end result. And now this young man goes to high school. By the way, the second story, he goes to high school, but not play basketball, playing another sport, but you can tell his whole demeanor is totally different now just because of that experience.
Do you think that has some type of effect on the ego? So when the student who left for 2 months, right? He might have been doing the wrong thing. He might have been hanging out with the wrong crowd, and he realized this is not my, future, right? I can't do this for the rest of my life. So he had a life lesson there, but his ego in the beginning was like, I know I'm so good. I know I'm so great. I don't need these other players on the team. I could play by myself, that ego. And I find that the ego doesn't show up for everyone. I was a teacher for many years, and it doesn't show up for everyone. However, it does show up for some people, and they have to learn how to control that ego, because if they don't, that ego is going to destroy them. Whether it be they think they're doing the right thing and they're trying to be the main dog, and then eventually people say, I don't like that, and then they shy away from them. So they had their 15 minutes of fame per se, but now people are like, wait, we don't like that type of personality. So they basically fall off their throne, right? Where they place themselves like, I'm better than everyone else. I know how amazing I am. Then they have to do some ego work, right? And it seems like the work you do is naturally impacting their ego, saying, okay, we can do this. I'm looking for acknowledgement, but coach is not going to give me that acknowledgement just because I want it, right? They might get that at home. Mom or dad says, you're doing great, keep it up. We appreciate you, we love you, on that stuff. Yeah, of course, right? Parents do their job. Coaches have a different job, right? A coach's job is to understand the limits of a child and to say, okay, where am I going to take this child, right? It's like you're an artist per se, and you have a canvas with your team, right? And you can make that canvas, that picture, anything you want. And of course, you're not the only artist there, right? You have your team saying, hey, why don't we add this? Why don't we do that? So everyone has a part in that final result, that final picture. And I find that to be amazing when people can come collectively and say, we want this to be the final result versus my ego saying, I want this way, but my heart is saying this way. Can we talk about like the heart of the team, right? The heart of the team saying, I, I want the team to be good, right? Even if I have to like give up some baskets, right? I'm not going to let my ego take over because I know that's not going to help me in the long run, right? To talk about the love for the team, the love for the community where people come together under one common goal to be victorious, to learn maybe if you're not victorious, but then to also have fun.
It's all about showing examples. For me, it's just like in this day and age, everything's on video. I mean, once it's out there, it's out there, right?
Mhm.
Social media, you can't go and edit everybody's phone and things of that nature, right? So examples, what you're talking about with a player having to do, you talk about the team before self. Well, think about the bigger picture, because that's how I approach my coaching. And when a kid comes in, it's not about athletics. I'm just
Mm,
using athletics to connect with them, and it makes it easier for me to teach everything else. So once they come in, the first example that comes to me is I'm a believer in simplicity, effort, and attitude. Those are three key words: simplicity, effort, and attitude. Keep whatever it is you're going through. Kids are already going through enough issues in life as it is pre-COVID. There's enough
mhm.
things going on. So just keep things simple. Whatever it is they're doing, applying the maximum effort towards that success. But the third component, the attitude, is the most important one, because you
Mm.
can't keep it simple and you can't apply any effort if you don't have the right attitude. So when you're talking about what a coach's role is, mine is getting the right mindset, kind of what you do. The mindset is, number one, your attitude's got to be right, because you can't be a team player if you don't have the right team player mentality and attitude. So the simplistic approach to my team before self, we don't dribble. This is a basketball thing. We don't dribble unless necessary. So I literally took the bounce out of the ball for the last 3 years, and the results were more efficiency, more collective teamwork, because you have to look for your teammates in order for the offense to run, because you can't keep the ball. So now guess what happens? Everybody else starts doing what they're supposed to do, because they know they have to get the ball in order for the offense to go. So going back to the point about the best player, yeah, he gets the ball, but he's got to get the ball right up if he's not creating an opportunity. So what does that do? That tells everybody we are equal and we're all working towards the common goal of the team, which is to be successful. And then, of course, you put plays, whatever. And we never, well, actually, I take that back. We don't run plays. Everything is based on principles. So when you lay a foundation of principles, you simplify the process so that they don't have to think so much, and you keep the goals and what your expectations are limited. You don't make a long list of things, and it makes it easier for them to understand it, and it keeps them focused on what their end goal is.
I find sports to be humbling, where sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, right? It's a life skill too, because sometimes we have successes, sometimes we have failures. And sports can be one of the best things for a child or a young adult to experience, because they are going to get that real world experience, those life skills through the sport, right? So they can do something in a safe environment where maybe the worst thing that can happen is they maybe get injured or they lose their game, right? So both are going to be big things, right? Because losing the game might not feel good, especially if it's a championship. They learn to deal with that type of trauma per se, and it might not be a huge trauma, right, where someone passes away or things of that nature, but they have a challenge. They have a difficulty that they have to overcome. Have you noticed that sports has been a positive life skill for people going in, learning the sport, learning teamwork, and then, of course, now they're adults, right? Because you've been in it for a while. Now they're adults. How are they using those sports skills in their life skills, right? So they learn a bunch of things, with you on the court, and now they're adults and they're off court. How are they using those nuggets of wisdom that you have taught them?
Oh my gosh, dude, this would be another 3 hours. And this kind of brings full circle what we're talking about in the first part of the interview about, when I started with kids then and how they are now. Kids are different. The connections I had with the players 30 some years ago are like they happened yesterday. Actually had one of my former players on my podcast, and one of the first things he said was he owed a lot of it to me, as well as his college coach. He is now the COO of the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Richmond. So
Mm,
you talk about giving back to your community and what he learned, and that's one of the things that he learned. Another former player is actually a state high school basketball champion back in the same city where we were, and he and I've been in communication consistently for 30 something years. The best example I can give you, he and another former teammate of his, I went back to visit my mom, and the three of us went out for drinks. I mean, what coach goes back when I was coaching these kids when they're 13 and 14 years old,
mhm,
and they want to go hang out and have a drink with their coach? That is what relationship building and fostering and maintaining relationships are really about. Kids today, it's so different. Yes, I have a great rapport with kids, but when they're gone, they're gone. And it's because society's changed. And me
mhm,
personally, I actually in the beginning took it personally because, like, man, I used to have relationships with kids, but then I realized life's different. Things are
mhm,
different. Society's different. Social media's made things so different, so much different. I know they still care. It's just in a different way.
mhm,
So for me, it's that's really important, is being able to teach and then see these kids turn around and do the same thing. And I'm not sure who'll see this, but I'm going to say this anyway. There's another former player who's a high school coach out in California now, and he was a freshman. And when I coached him, freshman and a sophomore, his senior year, they won the state title. I had left and moved on, but they won the state title as seniors. And I was talking with him a couple of years ago, and he said, "Coach, our coach was, he's a good coach and everything." He said, "But we won that championship because of you and what you taught us those first 2 years, and we just carried and built that. And what the varsity coach taught him was just easier because of the foundation you had set for us." So for a guy to tell you something like that 30 something years later means you made a significant impact on a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, that they still remember that. And the last example I give you, I think to me is one that is still like forefront of my mind. It's happened about 4 months ago. The aforementioned high school championship coach that I had coached when he was 13 reached out to me and said, "Hey, coach, there's another former player of yours that's trying to get in touch with you. And I didn't want to give him your information until I check with you." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So he sends me information. As soon as I see the name, I knew exactly who it was. It was from my second year to high school. This kid was like the 13th or 14th player out of 15 players on that team. But I remember going back to, I treat every player the same. I knew exactly who he was. He wanted to reach out to me and talk with me, and we set up a Zoom call, and it was just a great experience. He reached out to me because his 15-year-old son was going through some issues with his coach. And he said he caught himself reciting things that I had told him when he was a freshman at that high school 32 years ago. And he said he had to reach back out to me to let me know the impact that I had on his life, and that now he was sharing the same messages and experiences that I had shared with him when he was 13. So those are just a few examples of the magnitude of the impact of what coaches can have in lives. And then, but the flip side of the impact they've had on my life as a coach, because I never knew that I had that much impact.
mhm. And you're completely right about how times are changing with students nowadays and how they're leaving their relationships behind. Just look at dating, for example. Dating has become so easy, right? You can go online. There's apps like Tinder, Match.com, where you can just swipe and you can say you like a person or you don't like a person. You don't have to go up to anyone. You don't have to have that nervous jitters like, oh, are they going to like me? Are they going to accept me? You can just do it through the phone, do it through the computer. What that does is it doesn't make the relationship strong, right? It's kind of like a wet foundation for a home where if we don't let it set properly, that relationship can, become slanted, can crack. There's many things that can happen. And I find that many people who come to me with relationship problems, it's because they don't even know the first thing about having a substantial type of relationship. They have been so quick to end a relationship or to ghost someone, meaning they don't talk to them anymore. They don't even say a word. And now they're struggling in a relationship that they want to keep. How can we start to teach our young members of society that relationships are important, that we shouldn't just live in the moment with one person, and then once that moment is gone, say, okay, well, that was a nice moment, coach was great and everything, but I'm going to live my life. He was just there for my elementary years or my high school years.
Yes.
I'm not going to worry about him when I'm 30 years old and I have my own 15-year-old son. I'm just moving on with life. So they're constantly moving on, but they're not learning from their past relationships, right? So going into that, right? Like the importance of relationships, maintaining them, and then utilizing them in the future.
It all starts at home. If I'm
Mhm,
going to teach your kids about any relationships, it starts at home. And I'm going to use my niece and nephew, my older brother's kids. They are 28 and 29. I was taking care of them when they were a week old. I mean, I say taking care of them taking naps on my chest.
mhm,
They've never set foot in a daycare. They know what a relationship is. They value relationships because it started at home, family first. And everything was shared from their mom, their dad, my mom, my dad, my brothers. And what kids are not getting when it comes to relationships starts at home because they don't even know their parents. Because you know what?
mm,
Parents are so busy, just like they are. I don't know how many people but I know a lot of parents who are on their phones while their kids are sitting next to them. The kids are trying to talk to them.
mhm,
So their relationship building starts at home. So
mhm,
the parents are going to spend time teaching the importance of relationships. And if the kids don't know their parents, they're not going to get to know anybody else. And to your point about social media and all of the apps to meet people, that's exactly how they're going to learn how to build relationships or not build relationships. So parents are where it starts.
mhm,
I actually have a free course on my website. It's called Get to Know Your Parents. And it's like a list of 20, 30 questions. And you know what the purpose of it is? It's not just to find out, hey, mom, what was the one thing, what was your favorite course in high school? It wasn't to find out that, it's to start a conversation.
mhm,
And when you start conversations, that one question leads to another question, leads to another question. Now those questions lead to a conversation where you get to find out more about your mom or your dad, and your mom and dad get to find out more about you. Now they have an opportunity to drop some nuggets on you that you otherwise wouldn't get. But it takes something like that to make kids and parents understand that it starts at home. You can build nothing outside the four walls, confines of your home and expect it to flourish outside of that.
mhm. I love what you do about just asking questions, building that communication with the parent and the child, because you're 100% right. Parents are busy, right? Mom and dad are working. They're trying to figure out, okay, I need to get to work. I need to make sure my kids are in school. And then when the whole pandemic thing happened, they had to figure out who's going to watch these kids, right? Because now they can't just drop them off at school, go to work, and pick them up after work. So that was a whole different dynamic. So it's a lot of stress for parents. And I'm not going to belittle that. What we do have to understand is that we are living in a very easy society where if you're bored, you can change the channel, right? You can get a different game. There's so many different things you can do. When I was younger, I would go outside, right? I would go outside, ride my bikes around the neighborhood until the streetlights came on. Come home, I had mosquito bites all over my body, but I had a great sleep that night. And I remember, and I remember that like it was yesterday. As a soon to be father, I want to have my child experience that too, where I understand what made me and I understand being a teacher, what is happening in the schools. How can I lead this person to something good, to good communication in the family, to having good relationships, to being confident, to being a leader? And this is not all to put all this pressure on the child, right? is to allow them to be themselves, allow them to grow up and experience life. Because I remember my parents yelling at me for doing things that they might have not appreciated, right? And I'm sure I'm going to yell at my kids to be doing things that I don't like either. But I do have rules in the home, right? Whether it be when the TV can be turned on, where cell phones are allowed, because most people allow cell phones at the table, at the dinner table. Well, that's one of the prime areas you can have a like you can have good communication with your family, husband, wife, kids, grandma, grandpa, whoever comes to your table. Put the phone down, have a conversation with them. And it's not so much of a blanket conversation. How was your day? What did you learn? Right? Ask them the deeper questions, right? Similar to how you have those 30 questions that you can ask parents. It's not so much about asking them that initial question, it's about what comes after it,
Right.
right? Because if they ask me, well, I'm having problems with a girl at school or something like that, I could say, yeah, I remember, there was a story of when I was in third grade and it was a girl I liked, but then she was always running around with other boys and stuff like that. And so I didn't really want to pursue her because I didn't know if she liked me or she liked the other guy. So it could be like that, where now it's like, well, I'm having the same situation too, right? So they can just not tell you the whole picture, but they can tell you a little bit what's going on. You can offer some insight and they say, you know what, I'm going to take this wisdom, I'm going to utilize it. But it has to happen beyond the cell phone. It has to happen away from the screen. And again, we're living in a society where technology is so forefront, right? We have cars that can drive themselves. And when you have your cell phone, I mean, I know 4 year olds who have cell phones. They are in their car on their phone, doing whatever they're doing. That's another prime real estate for conversation. There's no phones allowed in the car unless we're doing like a super long road trip. Then, of course, that's going to keep everyone sane. But if we're just going to the grocery store 20, 30 minutes away, we're going to be talking that 20, 30 minutes, because I would use that time because I understand the impact of good communication. In order to have a strong relationship, you need at least 90 minutes. And it doesn't sound like a lot, 90 minutes of good communication every single week. If you don't have it, you don't have a strong relationship. We learn it subconsciously sometimes, like through our family, where this is how mom and dad is, and this is how grandma and grandpa is. This is how my uncle, aunt is, and they learn through the family. But how can people learn if they don't have that, right? Is there a way that you can teach that through sports, or is there an alternative way that we can have parents saying, "Hey, this is important. You have to do it at home."
Well, oh, actually, the latter part is exactly how you do it. Think about with the whole conversation we talked about what a coach's role is. Well, if I focus only on the athletic component, I'm like, well, you understand that we can be successful if we communicate with your
Mhm.
teammates and do. Why not do the same thing at home? And I'm actually going to throw another iron in the fire because I think you'll appreciate this one. So when I have parents that they'll book a lesson, a basketball lesson with me, and it's the first to one, they'll come in and they'll say, well, so and so, this is what needs to work on. I've been telling him or her this, but they tell me they're not going to listen to me, but then I know they'll listen to you. And then I'll come in and I'll say exactly what the parents said. And then the kids will follow, they'll follow exactly what I say. I call them out on it
Mhm.
because it's an opportunity for them to learn. And I'm honest. I always tell them, I will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And I'm like, so you'll listen to me. You'll let your parents pay me for you to listen to me and hear me say the exact same thing that they want you to do to be successful, and you won't listen. So help me understand how that works. And typically it's, well, they're always telling me. I said, yeah, but listen, their job, their responsibility when they had you was to give you everything they thought what you needed to be successful. So if you will take what they give you, you can analyze it and decide whether you want to do it or not, but don't come through here and I say it the first time and you do it and it works and you're all excited, because I'm not excited, because first thing it tells me is you're not respecting your parents enough to trust the advice that they're giving you. And the kids, they all keep coming, but those are opportunities for me to teach them about relationships and how to value the relationship with their parents more. And if I could throw this story in, because this happened several years ago, and it's probably the one time I actually kind of lost my cool with the kid. And it was when he and his dad had come. He had been coming for a while, but the dad sat in and watched. And I could tell that the son and the dad had a little bit of a little friction between them.
Hmm.
So I would give the kid some instructions. He'd do it. It's great. And the dad would chime in from the bleachers because he's sitting there. And I let it go for a little bit. And I went over and while the kid was getting more, I said, you're paying me to teach him. So let me do that. And the reason I let you sit here so you can see how I teach and how I go about it. Well, one particular time, the dad said something and the kid just snapped at his dad. And then the dad got a phone call, went outside. And I took the opportunity to have a conversation with a very, very frank and very direct conversation. I said, this is how this works. If you ever talk to your father like that again in front of me, you will not be welcome back in this gym ever again. And I said, you misunderstand the importance of a relationship between a father and son. You have a father. I lost my father in 1996. I wish he could be here to see what I do. I'm not promised tomorrow. You're not promised tomorrow with your father. You don't understand what he's trying to do. Yeah, he may come across and you don't like it, but that's your problem, not his. You're a child, he's an adult, and you need to respect that. After the next time he came, the dad came in first. He says, Coach, I don't know what happened after I left, but I just want to say thank you. I'm like, well, he goes, well, apparently after we left, the kid apologized to the dad on the way home. And he said, ever since then, their relationship had gotten better. But that's that tough love situation. And as a coach, yeah, did I step out of line? Yes and no. Because I wouldn't, if I talked to my dad like that or my mom, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. I can tell
Hmm.
you that. But
Yeah.
that's where I feel like sometimes you have to share those kind of things with them.
Hmm.
And if I could add, you didn't ask, but I'm going to share this. I'm having this conversation with you because of my father, because he was not my biological father. He adopted me and my older brother when we were really young.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't have had this opportunity. I know our time running. I knew I wouldn't have this opportunity to do this if he hadn't come into my life. So that is another reason that I do this, because somebody took the time and the sacrifice and provided a life for me I otherwise wouldn't have had. So
Hmm. Those type of moments, right, are going to be remembered forever. Like that is going to be impactful. You change that family's life for the rest of their lives. It's not just, well, it was the band-aid and you fixed it. You literally said, hey, this can't continue, because there's people who don't have fathers to yell at. There's people who would wish to be in your situation, and right now you're squandering it.
right,
And to make them aware of that, then they can start to realize, like, okay, I'm paying attention, right? It's one of the things that I have to be aware of too, right? Where do they come from, right? Because they can have a silver spoon, or they can be eating out of a garbage can, per se, where they're in the ghetto, they're in bad area, gang violence, drugs, things like that, where that's their environment. So they see that and they can appreciate the good things. For example, if there is a child who never had their own room, they might have not even had their own bed. So when they are going off to a basketball camp or something like that and they get to sleep in their own bed, that moment for them is bliss. They say,
right,
wow, I have my own bed. I never had this before, right? Thank you for, allowing me to come to this camp with, with the team and have this experience. And they can feel that, right? But they had the negativity and they can see the positive. So that moment of outburst was a moment of negativity, but you allow them to say, or to see, there's something positive that we should be looking at, and not just he's telling you to do something, right? He's
right,
being the boss over you. He's trying to help you. He's trying to lead you, guide you. That's why I always say it's important to have a coach, whether it be a coach like myself or a coach like you who teaches athletics. Those skills that the child is going to learn from just a coaching environment are going to help them in life in some way or form. It might not be immediately, but it will be somewhere down in the future where they say, okay, I'm 25 and I'm getting ready to go off after college. And now I'm going to use the skills that I have learned from mom and dad, from all my coaches, from my teachers. And now I'm going to present that to my situation, and I'm going to make it the best. If you have a coach that's there, that's giving you those nuggets, those moments where it's going to be the best lessons for them, they're going to start to say, okay, those relationships I want to keep. Right. And I think they have that feeling inside where they want to stay in touch with you. It's just that, how do I do it? Right. How can I stay in touch with this person when all my relationships are just momentarily. And so they have that thing in their mind saying, well, relationships are momentary. I'm not going to focus on them. And many people don't. Many people take life for granted, right? They always have tomorrow. They always have another time to do something, right? But time is fleeting, and we have to understand that we have one life and we have to make it the best. So if we can make an impact, whether it be with the people we teach or, with our family, right? Making that impact. And, what I would love for you to do is, to tell people where they can find you
Sure.
and what, websites, social media, everything. And then any final words.
Yeah, sure. So you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Coach T's Corner. Also, I have a private Facebook group, Developing Tomorrow's Leaders. And also, website is CoachT'sCorner.com. And most recently, I'm on TikTok, which is Coach T's Corner. Yeah.
Okay.
So start doing that. And last thoughts, I mentioned it earlier, simplicity, effort, and attitude. It's all also about educating, supporting, and inspiring the next generation of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that encompasses students, parents, and teachers. So kids need to understand, parents and teachers are there for them, but they also need to be supported by parents and teachers.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Wonderful words. So much wisdom from all the years of your teaching, coaching. And I know the students who have had you in the past are just going to be relishing in the fact that they had you as a coach. Kudos to you and keep up the good work. Everyone, Antwaun Thompson.